things would probably have worked out a lot better and a lot sooner had they just been upfront with Harry in the first place. You're listening to Path of the Wizard, and I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. All right, welcome to Path of the Wizard, where Harry Potter meets personal development. Welcome all my witches and wizards to what normally would be the Path of the Jedi, except it's Path of the Wizard now for our holiday special through the month of December, where we shift our focus away from Star Wars and on to Harry Potter, at least the film franchise. I would first and foremost like to thank each and every one of you for your patience in this delayed release of this week's episode. If you heard back to the update from a few days ago, I was a little under the weather and I wasn't able to get an episode out on time. So I really appreciate your guys' understanding, because just having those few extra days of downtime, I was able to get plenty of rest, did a whole bunch of nothing except watched a lot of movies, a lot of Star Wars and Harry Potter, played a lot of video games, and so thankfully now I'm feeling a lot better and delivering this episode for you today. So again, thank you guys so much, and for all of you guys who sent me messages, who sent me comments on Facebook and on Twitter, I appreciate you guys sending me your well wishes. It means the world to me, and I do want to let you guys know I am feeling much better. That said, in case you hear some coughs or some sniffles, I'm still at the tail end of it, you know what I mean? So I'm as I sniffle, I'm going to try to edit as much of that out as possible, but understand sometimes it's so integrated into the conversation that I won't be able to cut all of it out. So again, I appreciate your guys' understanding as I continue to heal, continue to get better, and continue to recuperate. Now, before we dive into the meat and potatoes of today's show, some things I have realized in the last couple of days about Harry Potter and my involvement or my knowledge of Harry Potter. I realized that because the films have been primarily the only source of exposure that I have to the franchise and to the Harry Potter universe, that my perspective is pretty limited. It's pretty limited. Watching these movies with my sister, who has read all the books, I realize there's so many more angles and so much more depth that I just have no idea of, right? Like I have no knowledge or awareness of. So moving forward, maybe next year, I'm definitely going to start reading the books. As I mentioned in the last full episode, I read the first two books and didn't go on to read the rest of the series. So I'm going to go back and read the books. Now, to that point, prior to starting the Path of the Wizard special here for the holidays, I was doing some research on other Harry Potter podcasts out there to see, what the restrictions were, etc., for Harry Potter, because I know typically that franchise is pretty strict about their rights and their properties. So I didn't want to, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't infringing. Infringing, is that a word? I don't know, whatever. I still have sinus brain right now, but yeah, you guys know what I mean. So doing the research, I actually stumbled across a really cool podcast called, let me look it up here, called Harry Potter and the Sacred Text. And what this podcast does, what the host of this podcast do, is they had pretty much it's like a reading club or a book club, right? And they go through Harry Potter chapter by chapter, all the books, and they have really just amazing, in-depth, insightful discussions about specific themes that happen in each of those chapters. So I'm going to be reading along with them. They're currently, I think, let me look here. They're on the second book, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So I'm just going to kind of pick it up where they are and follow along. So if you're interested in that at all, for all of my Harry Potter fans out there that want to reread and listen in on their discussion for maybe some deeper insights, I will leave a link to their show, to their podcast, in the show notes of this episode, and of course on the blog as well, so you can check that out. Again, the podcast is called Harry Potter and the Sacred Text with hosts Vanessa Volton and Matt Potts. All right, so in this episode, we are going to discuss, I think, my favorite movie in the entire franchise, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. This is the third film in the series, and it's one of my favorites, if not my favorite, for a lot of reasons. The first being that it really kind of bridged the gap between the first two movies and the rest of the series. The first two were very kind of kiddish. The students were still young. The characters were still in their first 2 years of school. And so in this particular movie kind of bridged that gap and moving into more serious themes, serious tones, darker tones, if you will, because obviously the rest of the series, they tackle some pretty heavy things. And I love that this particular movie, even stylistically, was able to beautifully bridge that gap and kind of turn the chapter, so to speak, on the film franchise. Another reason why I love this movie is for its very, very clever use of time travel. Now, typically, I have an issue with movies using time travel, but this particular movie did very well. It was nice and neat. It was clean, and it was really illustrative of a conversation that we've had here on the show before, that things in the past happened the way they were meant to happen because they've already happened. And again, if you guys watch this movie, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So lots of high marks for me for this movie. I really, really like it. And today we're going to explore the particular topics of secrets and duality, right? Duality. What I've noticed in watching these films again this year is that there's so much information being withheld from each other. The characters are very reluctant, it seems, to divulge and share information with each other, which to me is a little odd, given the state of things, right? Given what they're faced. Now, in the first couple of movies, makes a little bit of sense. The professors and the teachers and the staff, Dumbledore, isn't necessarily going to immediately divulge all the information to the kids. I mean, they're young kids, but as they start experiencing this stuff, we see Harry start to kind of act the same way with the professors, with Dumbledore, right? Like they're very guarded with the information that they share with each other, right? And so it's like, for me, it's like, man, all these secrets that you guys are keeping, if you guys were just a little bit more open in your communication, you probably wouldn't experience half the issues that you're experiencing, or you'd at least be able to better protect yourselves from the impending attacks from Voldemort and his cronies. In the movie, we have a notorious wizard by the name of Sirius Black, who has escaped from a maximum security wizard's magical prison type situation. And he's now at large. And so everybody is talking in hushed tones behind Harry's back. And meanwhile, Harry's thinking to himself, like, what does any of this have to do with me? And like I said, things would probably have worked out a lot better and a lot sooner had they just been upfront with Harry in the first place. I would argue that as a result of this, Harry starts to actually model this behavior. I mean, I think we all know that kids will mirror what we do, not what we tell them to do, right? And we see Harry doing this, withholding information, being more selective with what information he shares with the adults and his professors, more and more throughout the movies. It starts off in this one, and you can really start to see it, especially in the next two movies. He really starts to be very, very selective with the information that he shares, right? Now, of course, I understand that this is all necessary to drive the story and the movie forward, of course. But in real life, guys, I don't know, my perspective is that doesn't serve any of us at all, right? Being selective about information, withholding information, being secretive doesn't help you in any situation whatsoever. I think withholding information is an attempt to exert control over things that you have no right nor ability to control in the first place. And what I know is things that matter ultimately have a way of coming to light anyway. So you might as well be upfront, right? Be upfront, be honest, be forward. Share information, especially where information is needed. Remember, the Jedi Code says there is no ignorance, there is knowledge. Now, speaking of secrets, there is a supporting character by the name of Professor Remus Lupin, who has a secret of his own, actually. Through the course of the movie, we come to find out that Professor Lupin, the kind and thoughtful Professor Lupin, is actually a werewolf. And I absolutely, like, first of all, I kind of, since childhood, I've always been fascinated by the legend and the lore of werewolves. But I love this particular character in this context because he's such a great metaphor for each and every one of us, right? For the duality that exists in each and every one of us. Now, I'm not talking about duality in the sense that there's good and evil in each and every one of us, right? I don't want to throw those labels into the conversation. What I really want to explore with Lupin is that he's such a metaphor for our conscious and unconscious mind, right? We have the conscious mind, the kind and thoughtful Professor Lupin who just wants to do good. He's a teacher. He loves children. And then you have the unconscious mind represented by the werewolf side of him, right? As the werewolf, Professor Lupin is completely unaware. The werewolf is infinitely more powerful and strong and is completely indiscriminate, right? He's just running on autopilot. The Hulk and Bruce Banner, the same exact thing, which, by the way, as an aside, the Hulk is one of my favorite Marvel characters, right? So I love this metaphor, right? I love Lupin and the werewolf as a metaphor for our conscious and unconscious minds, because our unconscious minds are the ones driving the ship, right? They are the ones that are running the show. If you look at Lupin as the example, he may appear to be, all together when he's a human form, but in reality, deep down, because he has his secret, he has to live his life in accordance to the werewolf side of him, right? The lifestyle decisions that he makes are all governed by that. And it's the same thing for us, right? The unconscious mind, that werewolf side of our brains, are the ones running the show. You may not be aware of it, but we're just a sequence of repeated patterns and habits. That's it. Well, you might be asking, then what's the frickin' point? What's the point of talking all this personal development stuff if we're not even the ones running the show? Well, thankfully, we're not werewolves. Or at least I personally haven't found evidence that they exist. Now, our unconscious mind might be running the show. It might be driving the ship. But our conscious minds are still the captain. They're still in charge if we want them to be. We don't have to be stuck with the same habits and patterns, especially if they're not supporting and serving the outcomes that we want in our lives. The ability of the conscious mind is to be able to consciously program the unconscious mind with any habit and pattern that it wants. So yes, the unconscious mind is infinitely more powerful and is working and running without us even having to think about it. But our conscious mind's ability is to give the unconscious mind the programming. Of course, it takes consistent and continual commitment, but it's completely doable. As a coach and a mentor, that's exactly what I do. I walk people through this entire process of creating new habits and patterns that ultimately will serve and support the outcomes that they want in their lives. And here's where it all comes together. Like the great Jim Rohn said, for things to change, you have to change. The most important person that you have to be upfront and honest and frank with is you. If there are things that you are unhappy with in your life, if there are things that you want to change, you have to take honest stock of the situation. You have to take responsibility. This is so important because only then will you be able to have an honest conversation with your unconscious mind, with your werewolf side, so that you can give it productive instructions to create habits and patterns that will ultimately lead to positive and lasting change. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. What do you guys think? Is honesty the best policy? Do werewolves exist? Inquiring minds want to know. Hit us up on Twitter. It's at POTJ Podcast. On Facebook as well, facebook.com/POTJ Podcast. Yeah, let us know what you think about today's episode or any other episode that you've heard in the past. Or, let us know what you think about the Harry Potter as the basis of the conversation. I'm really enjoying it, actually. There's a lot to explore here. And of course, you can send an email to info@pathofthejedi.com with today's episode title in the subject heading. Leave me a message or send an MP3 to that email. Again, I would love to play your message here on the show. Again, the email is info@pathofthejedi.com. And as a reminder, our Think and Grow Rich weekly discussion group is underway. If you're interested in joining us, you are not too far behind. We just started last week, so you can join us every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. If you're interested, you can send an email to info@pathofthejedi.com with Think and Grow Rich in the subject heading and let us know you want to join, and I will send you the weekly Zoom link for that. And of course, last and certainly not very least, our shout out. This week's shout out goes to Mr. Daniel Datiles. That is right, Dan Datiles, Dano himself. All right, so a little bit of back history about Dan and I. Dan and his sister Dulcie actually were the first people that I met when I moved here to the U.S. Well, the first, people my age. And so we're talking, Dan was 3 at that time. I was 5. So these are lifelong friends. I don't know much of a life without Dan being in the picture. So I feel so incredibly blessed and privileged to have a friendship that still to this day is as close as it's ever been, and we get closer and closer as with every passing year that goes by. And I really wanted to recognize Dan and his wife Om and their 2 beautiful kids on this week's show because I was actually supposed to go meet with them this past week, and unfortunately, because I fell ill, I made the decision, and it was a tough decision to make, guys. Understand, I absolutely, number one, love going to visit these guys. They're family to me, and it was just so hard, right? I didn't want to disappoint, and I wanted to see them, right? They fill my cup. But, I made the executive decision because I was ill and I didn't want them to get sick as well. And I really, really struggled with this decision, guys. For those of you who know me personally, you know that if I can be there, I'll be there, right? Right? And so I very, very last minute finally made the decision. I was like, okay, I can't go. I'm too sick. And I called Dan, and he was so gracious and so understanding. That's what you got to understand about this guy. He's the nicest guy on the planet, and he will understand anything and everything, right? Because his love is just so unconditional, and as worried as I was about not showing up, he completely just put all of that at ease, and he was like, dude, don't even sweat it, man, don't even sweat it. And understand, guys, this is after the fact that him and his wife created and put together an entire feast for the night, right? I was like, oh my God. But again, he was so gracious. So gracious, and just allowed me to rain check and call in sick for this visit. So Dan, if you're listening out there, you and I want you guys to know that I love and appreciate you guys very much. I will make it up to you, and so this week's shout out goes to you guys. And that's it. So next week's show, guys, is going to be released on our normal day, Wednesday. That is barring everything, nothing goes sideways, right? So expect a new episode, fresh episode next Wednesday, which I want to give you guys a heads up in advance. It will be the last live recorded episode, right? The last live recorded episode of the year. I'm going to take the rest of the year off, preparing, taking some time off, first of all, but also preparing some stuff for the new year. Got some exciting stuff that I'll tell you about in next week's episode. Some exciting stuff set up for the new year. So just be on the lookout for that. Be on the lookout for next week's episode on Wednesday. Beyond that, you guys have been amazing. Again, incredibly understanding for this week and everything that I've had to deal with. So thank you. Until next time, everybody, please be well, be safe, and as always, may the Force be with you. This podcast is not endorsed by the
Warner Brothers,
nor
J.K. Rowling,
and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official
Harry Potter
website can be found at
www.wizardingworld.com. Harry Potter.
All names and sounds and any other
Harry Potter
related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of
Warner Brothers
and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.
Mischief managed.